I'm falling for the cowboy next door. The Texan sun was merciless as I pulled up to my father's ranch in my pristine Tesla. Everything looked exactly like the pictures in Dad's Christmas cards. The ones I'd barely glanced at over the years. My throat tightened. God, I've been such an ass. I was fishing for my keys the lawyer had given me when I heard the distinctive click of a shotgun behind me. I froze. Step away from the property now. The voice was deep, gravelly, and sent an inappropriate shiver down my spine. What the hell am I about to be shot dead in 10 seconds since I got here? I thought as I turned slowly. Hands raised, and my breath caught. The man holding the shotgun was straight out of a Western fantasy, tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair falling across his forehead and a jawline that could cut glass. His worn jeans and dusty boots should have looked cliché. Instead, they looked dangerous. Delicious. I said, "Step away." He advanced, and I backed up until I hit the porch wall. He followed, crowding into my space, and, dear God, he smelled like leather and unwashed skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. I am not a thief, I stammered, and he narrowed his eyes on me. Then who are you? Cato Bennett, I managed, hating how breathy my voice sounded. This is my father's ranch. His eyes narrowed, and he pressed closer. I could feel the heat radiating off of his body. James Bennett's boy. The one who couldn't be bothered to visit his dying father. The words hit like a physical blow. I glared hard at him. You don't know anything about me. I know you're wearing $1,200 boots that have never seen a day's work. His gaze raked over me, lingering in ways that made my skin burn. I know you're probably here to sell this place to those resort developers who've been sniffing around. Get out of my face. I snarled, shoving at his chest. Rock solid. And, Jesus, what I want to do with my relationship with my father is none of your business. He caught my wrist, pinning it to the wall beside my head. It became my business when I was the one sitting with your father. When he was calling for you every day for nearly 2 weeks. Begging the nurses to try your number again. Telling me how his successful son in Boston was probably just too busy to pick up. Our faces were inches apart. I could see the flecks of gold in his angry eyes. Count his eyelashes. Feel his breath on my lips. The tension between us crackled with something that definitely wasn't just anger. Who the hell are you? I whispered. Eric McKinnon. I own the ranch next door. He released my wrist and stepped back, leaving me embarrassingly unsteady. James was a good man. He deserved better than a son who shows up only after he's dead. The words hit their mark with devastating accuracy. I straightened, letting ice fill my voice. Well, Eric McKinnon, since you appointed yourself my father's replacement son, you'll be thrilled to know I'm here to stay. So you can take your opinions and shove them right up your sanctimonious ass. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise. Maybe appreciation for the spine I'd shown. Then his expression hardened again. We'll see how long that lasts. City boys like you don't belong here. He turned and stalked away, leaving me shaking with a toxic cocktail of guilt, anger, and mortifying arousal. I watched him go, hating how my eyes tracked the movement of his shoulders, the confident swagger in his stride. Oh God, I muttered, letting my head thunk back against the wall. What kind of masochistic twist of fate was this? The first man to make my pulse race since Mark had to be this judgmental cowboy who'd taken one look at me and seen everything I'd spent years trying to forget. I was spoiled. Selfish. A disappointment. I fished out my phone. Thumb hovering over Mark's number. My fiancé would know how to talk me down. Help me laugh this off. But Mark was busy with our business back in Boston. And besides, I didn't know how to explain why some stranger's opinion of me hurt me so much. Or why, despite everything Eric had said, all I could think about was the feeling of his body pressing against mine. I pushed off the wall and unlocked the door. The house smelled like leather and coffee and memory. On the kitchen table, I found a leather-bound notebook. Dad's journal. The last entry was dated just 2 weeks before he died. Eric stopped by again today. Boys worried sick about Bennett coming. Afraid though he won't admit it. Reminds me so much of myself at his age. Wish Kato could meet him. Think they'd either kill each other or. The entry ended there. I closed the journal. My fingers trembling. Sadness threatening to engulf me. Damn you, Dad, I whispered to the empty house. What the hell am I supposed to do now? I crumpled the foreclosure notice in my fist, fighting the urge to scream. 2 weeks on the ranch, and I was already failing. The bank's deadline loomed, and the vultures were circling. Specifically Blake Thompson from the Sunset Resorts, who'd left 3 voicemails just this morning. The sound of boots on gravel made me turn. Eric was striding towards me. All righteous anger and stupid perfect jawline. You planning to tell me about the foreclosure notice? I've been going through my mail. I snapped, shoving the paper in my pocket. That's a federal offense. Cowboy. He invaded my space, he was always doing that. Getting close enough that I could smell leather and sunshine on his skin. Your father made me promise to look after this place. Well, consider yourself released from that promise. I tried to step around, but he caught my arm, spinning me back. The momentum brought us chest to chest, and my breath hitched. You're as thick-headed as your father, he growled, his hand burning through my shirt sleeve. Something in me snapped. I shoved him hard, surprising him enough that he stumbled back. What do you know about my father? Huh? A few months of playing nursemaid doesn't make you family. His eyes darkened dangerously. He grabbed my shirt and backed me up against the barn wall. My heart thundered as he leaned in close, his breath hot against my ear. I know he spent every Thursday night at my table, showing me pictures of his son's fancy landscape architecture business in Boston. I know he bragged about how his boy bought this ranch for him when he retired. I know he loved you so damn much it killed him that you couldn't spare a single visit when he got sick. Guilt and desire warred in my stomach. I turned my face away, but Eric caught my chin, forcing me to meet his gaze. His thumbs brushed my jaw, a touch so gentle it made my knees weak. I didn't know, I whispered, hating how my voice broke. He never told me how bad it was. A woman's voice cut through the tension. Colt, are you here? Eric jerked away from me like I burned him. A pretty brunette in a sundress was walking towards us, one hand resting on her slightly rounded belly. My stomach dropped as I connected the dots. Melissa, Eric said, running a hand through his hair. I wasn't expecting you until next week. She gave a tremulous smile. We need to talk about the baby. I watched Eric's face pale, saw the way his hands trembled slightly before he clenched them into fists. Something protective stirred in my chest. warring with the irrational jealousy that this woman had known him intimately. "I'll leave you to it," I muttered, pushing off the wall. "This conversation isn't over." Eric called after me. "The bank's deadline is in 3 weeks. I'm helping whether you like it or not." I flipped him off without turning around, ignoring how my skin still tingled where he touched me. Behind me, I heard Melissa say something in a tearful voice and Eric's low, soothing response. My phone buzzed. Mark, probably wondering why I'd missed our nightly call again. I ignored it, heading for Dad's office instead. I needed to figure out exactly how bad the ranch's finances were. And I couldn't do that whilst thinking about Eric's hands on my skin or the way his voice got rough when he was angry. I definitely couldn't think about how he was about to become a father or why that knowledge made my chest ache in ways that had nothing to do with the attraction. The office still smelled like Dad's pipe tobacco. I sat in his chair, running my fingers over the worn leather armrest. What am I supposed to do? I whispered to the empty room. I can't lose your ranch. But I don't know how to save it. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was Blake Thompson. Just heard about the foreclosure notice. My office still stands. Think about it, Mr. Bennett. Some things aren't worth saving. I stared at the message until the screen went dark. Then dropped my head into my hands. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure anymore what I was trying harder to save. The ranch or my pride. And why did the thought of giving up and leaving make me think not of the ranch but of Eric's burning touch and accusations that tasted like truth? A day later, I was sprawled on the ranch office floor at midnight, surrounded by financial statements and increasingly desperate calculations when the door creaked open. Eric stood there, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You look like hell," he said, nudging my leg with his boot. "Thanks. Just what every guy wants to hear at midnight." I scrubbed my hands over my face, pretending I hadn't noticed how good he looked in the low lamplight. "What are you doing here?" I saw the light on. "Figured you were still being stubborn." He set 1 coffee beside me and leaned against Dad's desk, arms crossed. "Found anything useful in those papers?" I laughed hollowly. "Yeah, I'm screwed 6 ways to Sunday unless I can pull a miracle out of my ass in the next 2 weeks. Or you could accept my help." I told you, yeah, you don't need my help." He crouched down, picking up one of the statements. "How is that working out for you?" I snatched the paper back, but not before catching his knowing smirk. "God, you're insufferable. Part of my charm. Maybe it was the late hour. Or the 5th cup of coffee. Or the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. But suddenly everything spilled out. The ranch is bleeding money. Traditional cattle operations barely break even these days. And we don't have enough saved to modernize the equipment. The bank wants 60,000 by the end of the month. And that resort vulture keeps calling with generous offers that would turn this place into some fake cowboy fantasy camp." And I broke off. Realizing I was blabbering, Eric just watched me, something soft in his expression. Then it hit me. "Wait, fantasy camp." I scrambled for my laptop, nearly knocking over the coffee. "That's it. What's it? We don't fight the fantasy, we lean into it. But authentically." My fingers flew over the keyboard as I pulled up some of my old design projects. "Look, in Boston, I specialized in adaptive reuse. Taking old buildings and giving them new life while preserving their character. We could do that here." Eric settled beside me on the floor, his thigh warm against mine as he peered at the screen. You want to renovate the barn? Could be an event space. Weddings. Corporate retreats. We could offer trail rides. Cattle drive experiences. And glamping for city folks who want to play cowboy for the weekend but still have their creature comforts. The ideas were flowing. Real ranch experience with an upscale twist. And with your expertise. I caught myself. I mean, if you're still willing. He was quiet for a long time. Studying my face. You really love this place. Don't you? The question caught me off guard. Yeah, I do. I looked around at the photos on the walls. The worn leather of Dad's chair. I know I don't deserve it. Showing up so late. But, stop. His hand landed on my knee, sending sparks up my spine. Your father would be proud of this idea. Yeah, maybe not. The man is too stubborn. We both laughed, and then he squeezed my knee once before letting go. All right, city boy, I'm in, but we do this my way. 2. No cutting corners on the authentic experience just to please some corporate types. Deal? I held out my hand, trying to ignore how much I wanted him to touch me again. Partners. He clasped my hand, his grip warm and strong. Partners. Your father would have a heart attack if he saw what we were doing to his barn. Eric said, watching as I sketched out my vision of converting the old structure into an event space. He'd get over it once he saw the booking requests rolling in. I couldn't help grinning as Eric leaned in over my shoulder, his chest brushing my back. After 2 weeks of working together, I'd gotten used to the way my pulse jumped whenever he got close. Almost weddings, corporate retreats. He traced the outline of my design with one calloused finger. You might actually know what you're doing. City boy. Try not to sound so surprised. I tilted my head back to look at him, realizing too late how close that brought our faces. His eyes darkened, and for a moment, neither of us moved. God, if I could just press my lips against. Then he straightened, clearing his throat. Break time. Beer? I followed him to the porch, admiring the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm these past weeks, working side by side during the day, sharing beers at sunset. Sometimes I caught myself forgetting that we'd hated each other at first. So I took a pull from my beer. Melissa stopped by again yesterday. Eric's jaw tightened. Yeah, want to talk about it? He was quiet so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, it was one night at a rodeo in Houston. She was passing through. I was lonely, I guess. He ran a hand through his hair. She doesn't want to keep the baby, but she's willing to carry to term if I take full custody. You're okay with that? Being a single dad? His eyes met mine, fierce and certain. That baby's mine, and I'm not walking away just because it's hard. Something warm unfurled in my chest. That's actually really admirable. He snorted. Don't sound so surprised. No, I mean it. I turned to face him fully. Though I guess I was wrong about something. Yeah? Well, I gave him a teasing smile. I could have sworn you looked at me sometimes like, but clearly I was imagining things. Since you and Melissa, he laughed, low and rough. Trust me, Kato. His eyes raked over me. Hot enough to burn. You weren't imagining anything. My breath caught. Oh, I've wanted you since that first day. He set his beer down, turning to face me. Even when I wanted to strangle you. I wanted to kiss you more. The air between us crackled. He reached out, brushing his thumb across my bottom lip. I shuddered. Cold. He leaned in, his breath warm against my mouth. My eyes fluttered closed. Patrick. We jerked apart. Mark stood at the bottom of the porch steps, designer luggage at his feet, looking between us with confusion and excitement. Mark? My voice came out strangled. What are you doing here? Surprise. He climbed the steps, pulling me into a kiss. I missed my fiancé. I felt more than saw Eric go still beside me. When I dared to look, his face was carefully blank. Fiancé? He said softly. Mark wrapped an arm around my waist. Almost a month now. Patrick didn't mention me? Must have slipped his mind. Eric's voice could have frozen hell. He picked up his beer, nodded curtly. I should go. Lots of work tomorrow. I watched him walk away, my chest tight with guilt and something that felt dangerously like a loss. Mark was talking about his flight, about how much he'd missed me. But all I could think about was the look in Eric's eyes right before he'd almost kissed me. That night, lying next to Mark in my father's house, I stared at the ceiling and tried to convince myself that the sick feeling in my stomach was just guilt about almost cheating. Not regret that Eric's lips never quite reached mine. I failed miserably at both. One afternoon, I was working on some ranch paperwork when I heard a car pull up. Looking out the window, I saw a sleek car I didn't recognize. Definitely not local, given how pristine it looked. A well-dressed man stepped out, looking around uncertainly. I figured it was probably another potential client interested in our ranch experience packages. We'd been getting more of those lately. Hello, can I help you? I called from the porch. Yes, I am looking for Mark Preston. I blinked in surprise. Mark? I didn't know he was expecting anyone here. Oh, he's not. I thought I'd surprise him. The man smiled warmly. He said he's here for work and I shouldn't disturb him. But I couldn't help it. Something felt off. How did this man even know Mark was here? Before I could ask, Mark came walking up from the barn. He stopped dead when he saw our visitor, all color draining from his face. Andrew. The man rushed forwards, and, before I could process what was happening, pulled Mark into a passionate kiss. I've missed you so much. Baby. The world tilted sideways. Kato. Mark pushed Andrew away, panic in his eyes. I can explain. Andrew turned, noticing my expression for the first time. Who's Kato? His fiancé, I said quietly. Andrew went completely still. Then he turned to Mark, shock and fury crossing his features. You're what? You told me you were single. He backed away from both of us. You disgusting bastard. With that, he stormed back into his car and sped away, leaving Mark and me in devastating silence. Son of a... I heard Eric's voice behind me. I glared at Mark. You were cheating on me. The color drained from Mark's face. I can explain, don't bother. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Just don't, Patrick. How long? He swallowed. 8 months. 8 months. Including when Dad was. Hell, I think you should leave. Eric said, his voice deadly quiet. Mark reached for me. Baby. Please, don't touch me. The words ripped from my throat. 8 months. When you had that business meeting in Texas? Instead, you started cheating on me. All while my father was dying. And you deliberately kept me from knowing. Patrick, you were sick in the hospital. Stop lying. The truth I'd been avoiding clicked into place. 5 days in the hospital. You controlled everything. Told me you'd handle all the calls. Then 2 more weeks of you intercepting my father's calls. Putting my phone on silent during meetings. My voice cracked with fury. You kept telling me you'd called my dad and he was just calling to chat about ranch work as usual. That everything was fine, but he was dying. Mark. My father was dying. Mark paled. I thought he was calling about something else. He saw me in Texas with him. And I was so sure that's why he kept calling. You kept me from my dying father because you thought he was going to expose your affair? My hands shook with rage. So you made sure I never knew how desperate he was to reach me. Never knew about the cancer coming back. Mark's silence was answer enough. Get out. When he didn't move, I hurled my phone at the wall. Get out. He fled. I heard his rental car start. The gravel crunching as he sped away. The silence he left behind roared in my ears. Kato. Eric stepped closer. Don't. My legs gave out as I sank to the floor. Just don't. He sat beside me anyway. Our shoulders touching. We stayed like that until my breathing steadied. I got food poisoning, I said finally. My voice hollow. Severe enough to land me in the hospital for 5 days. Mark. He took control of everything. My phone. All communications. Said he'd handle it all so I could focus on getting better. I swallowed hard. After I got out, he kept intercepting Dad's calls. Kept my phone on silent during supposed meetings. Deleted messages. Told me Dad was just busy with ranch work. That is cool when he could. My voice broke for 2 weeks. My father tried to tell me the cancer was back. That it was aggressive this time. He died thinking I was too busy to call him back. And I'll never get to tell him the truth. Eric's hand found mine. Fingers intertwining. Mark manipulated everything. Made sure you couldn't know. I should have seen through it. You were sick. And you trusted your fiancé. That's not a crime. I should have tried harder. Should have. Thunder cracked overhead, making us both jump. Through the window, I saw the storm clouds that had been threatening all day had finally rolled in. Eric jumped up. The new fence line. The barn renovation. We spoke at the same time. We ran out into the rain, racing to secure everything we'd built. The wind howled, rain stinging my face as we worked. Eric's shirt clung to his body. And even in crisis, I couldn't help noticing the support beams. He shouted over the storm. They're not secure yet. We struggled with the temporary braces. Shoulders pressed together, muscles straining. A particularly strong gust almost knocked me off my feet. Eric caught me, spinning me against one of the stable beams. Careful, he growled, his body pinning mine. Rain dripped from his hair onto my face. His hands were still on my hips, burning through my wet clothes. I could feel his heart hammering against my chest. Colt, I know I shouldn't. He breathed. You're hurting. You're vulnerable. I've wanted you since that first day. 2. I echoed his words from weeks ago. Even when I was with Mark. God help me. Even then, even now. I want you so much. His control snapped. His mouth crashed into mine. Desperate and demanding. I groaned, fingers tangling in his wet hair as I pulled him closer. He tasted like rain and wanton possibility. So hot. I moaned softly. We shouldn't. He gasped between kisses, even as his hand slid under my shirt. We should. I corrected, nipping his lower lip. We absolutely should. He growled, pressing me harder against the beam as he kissed down my neck. You drive me crazy. You know that? Good. I gasped as he found a sensitive spot. Now shut up and kiss me again. He did. The storm raged around us. But all I could feel was the heat of his mouth, the strength of his hands, the promise of something real. Finally within reach. Sweetheart, Daddy needs his sleep, I whispered, cradling 2-week-old Emma against my chest as I paced the nursery. Through the baby monitor, I could hear Eric's soft snores from his bedroom, the first real sleep he'd gotten in days. Emma's tiny hand curled around my finger as her cries quieted to gentle coos. I smiled down at her. This perfect little thing who'd stolen all our hearts. She had Eric's dark hair and determination already so strong-willed at just 2 weeks old. Your daddy's going to teach you to ride horses, I murmured, settling into the rocking chair. And I'll teach you all about architecture. Between the two of us, you'll be running this place by the time you're 5. Already plotting my daughter's future. Eric's sleepy, rough voice came from the doorway. You're supposed to be sleeping. He crossed to us, dropping a kiss on Emma's forehead. Then my lips. Bed's cold without you. I smiled, but I leaned into his touch as he massaged my neck. Just needed some Uncle Cato time. Uncle Cato? He repeated softly. His hand stilled on my shoulder. You're much more than that. Before I could respond, Emma made a disgruntled sound. Someone needs changing. I laughed, standing carefully. Go back to bed. I've got this. He watched us with an expression that made my heart flip. Thank you, he said simply. Yeah, now sleep. Later that afternoon, I was reviewing the ranch's latest numbers. Bookings for the event barn were solid through the fall. And our luxury Cowboy experience packages were selling out months in advance when Eric appeared in the doorway. Ride with me, he said. Need to check the north fence line. Emma Rose has got her come on. City boy, show me you remember what I taught you. The spring air was sweet as we rode. Wild flowers dotting the pastures. Our shoulders brushed occasionally. Comfortable silence between us. Place looks different, I noted as we passed the renovated barn. Dad would hardly recognize it. He'd love it, Eric said confidently. He always said this place needed someone with vision to bring it into the future. We reached the ridge overlooking the valley. The spot where Dad used to come to think. The setting sun painted everything gold. Remember the first time we came up here? Eric asked, dismounting. You called me a city slicker and bet me $50 I couldn't stay on my horse. And you won that bet. He helped me down, his hands lingering on my waist. That's when I knew I was in trouble. Because I cost you $50? Because you surprised me. His eyes were intense. You keep doing that. My breath caught at his tone. Colt. He took my hand, pressing something small and metal into my palm. A ring. A simple gold band with a subtle Western design. I know it's long overdue. But I've come to realize I love you. Cato. He said quietly. I really love you. Even though I tried so hard to run away from it all these months. I can't do it anymore. My vision blurred. Oh my goodness. Colt, I do love you so much. I never want to lose you. His hand cued my cheek. The ranch is thriving because of you. My life is better because of you. And I know it's fast and maybe I'm crazy. But, I cut him off with a kiss. Yes. He blinked. I haven't asked yet. Don't care. Yes. He laughed. That full, beautiful laugh I had fallen in love with. Marry me, Cato Bennett. Make this place your home forever. I looked over the ranch. Our ranch. as the sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The renovated barn where we first kissed. The house we'd become a family. The land that had brought us together. It already is, I whispered, pulling him down for another kiss. It always was. I just needed you to help me find my way back. His arms wrapped around me, strong and sure, as the sun set on our old life and rose on our new one. Behind us, 2 horses gazed peacefully, and somewhere in the distance, a baby girl waited for her fathers to come home. I was exactly where I belonged. Life on the ranch is better than ever. The business is thriving, our event barn is booked solid, and the cattle are healthy. And our Cowboy experience packages are a hit. But more importantly, our little family is thriving, too. Eric and I have settled into a rhythm, balancing work, late-night baby feedings, and stolen kisses between chores. Emma is growing fast, already trying to grab the reins when Eric takes her on short rides. Every day feels like a fresh start, a future we're building together, looking out over the land with Eric by my side and Emma in my arms. I know one thing for sure, this is home, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. Have you ever found yourself falling for someone who started out as an enemy? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become a part of our Rainbow Force and stay wholesome.